Okay, let's dive in. Imagine a world where doing something really positive for the planet wasn't, super complicated.
Yeah, no waiting around for massive policy shifts or some sci-fi tech.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if it was actually as simple as, well, borrowing a stand-up paddleboard instead of rushing out to buy one?
Or maybe renting a stroller just for that one trip.
That exact idea, just sharing items rather than everyone buying their own brand new one.
Yeah.
It turns out it might be one of the most powerful things we can do individually for the environment.
It really comes down to reducing the demand for new stuff. When we do that, we directly cut into the manufacturing process.
Which is a huge source of environmental impact.
Absolutely massive. The resource extraction, the energy use, the waste, it all adds up.
And that's precisely what we're digging into today. We've got some fascinating excerpts here from an article titled The Ecologic of Renting, Share, Save, Sustain.
Mm-hmm. And this piece, it makes a really strong case that shifting towards, renting and sharing, it isn't just about convenience or saving money.
Though it is definitely both of those things.
Oh, for sure. But the article argues it's actually a surprisingly powerful tool for sustainability.
So our mission today is to really unpack the core ideas from this article. We want to understand the environmental math behind sharing.
Yeah, and see how these choices, which seem pretty small on the surface, these everyday things, how they can actually stack up to make a really significant positive impact.
Okay, so let's think about that manufacturing chain again.
Right. Every single new item, it needs raw materials. You're talking mining ores, cutting down forests, drilling for oil.
And then there's all the energy needed just to process those materials.
Plus the water usage, the factories themselves building them, running them, and then that whole complex web of transportation to get the final thing to you.
That entire chain just carries a really heavy environmental footprint.
But if you share an item that's already out there, already been made, you basically bypass all of that initial impact.
For every single person who uses that shared item instead of buying new.
Exactly. It's a huge leverage point.
And the article highlights how different platforms are making this so much easier now, connecting people who, have stuff they don't use all the time with people who just need it temporarily.
But let's get into the actual numbers, because that's where it becomes quite eye-opening.
Yeah, the quantifiable impact, particularly on carbon emissions.
Yeah.
The article breaks it down with some really clear examples.
Okay, where should we start?
Let's start with a stand-up paddleboard, the SUP. According to the article, the carbon footprint just to make one is around 100 kilograms of euro.
Okay, 100 kilos. And what's really interesting is how little most privately owned SUPs actually get used.
Right. The article notes most buyers only take them out maybe, 3 to 5 times a summer?
Yeah, compare that to a single SUP that's on a sharing platform. That one board could potentially be rented out 30, maybe even more times in just that same season.
So you see the math starting to take shape here.
Mm-hmm.
If, say, just 10 different people rent that one shared SUP for a few times each instead of all 10 buying their own,
you could potentially avoid, 1,000 kilograms of euro. Just like that.
And to put that 1,000 kilos into perspective, the article says that's like driving a regular car over 2,500 miles.
And that's just with 10 users sharing one board. Imagine scaling that up.
Okay, let's look at another one. Bicycles.
Ah, yes. Bikes. The impact is even clearer there. Manufacturing an adult bike, the article tells us, generates around 240 kilograms of euro.
240 kilos. And again, think about how many people buy bikes for, occasional use.
Yeah.
Weekend rides, maybe a vacation.
And the rest of the time, they're just sitting there, in the garage, in the shed, idle.
But that same bike, through a rental service, could easily get 50 or even more rides per season.
So the article calculates if 50 different users rent that one shared bike instead of 50 people buying 50 new bikes.
You're looking at avoiding over 11,500 kilograms of euro.
Now that number, that really starts to feel significant.
Definitely. The article equates that saving 11,500 kilos to the annual electricity consumption of an entire average household.
Wow. It just highlights how much environmental pressure is tied up in owning things that we just don't use very often. Low utilization ownership, basically.
And it's not just leisure gear, right? The article talks about baby items.
Yeah, that's a big one. A baby stroller, for example. Its manufacturing emissions range somewhere between 100 and 200 kilograms of euro.
And as any parent knows, you often only need these things for a relatively short window.
Exactly. Maybe 1 or 2 years, sometimes even less, especially for those specialized things like travel strollers or bassinets.
But that same stroller is perfectly good, totally functional, and could easily be used by 10, maybe even 20 different families over its lifespan if it's shared.
So the article suggests if just one stroller gets reused 15 times through rentals instead of being bought new each time.
That alone can save up to 2,800 kilograms of co-euro.
And beyond the CO2, think about the physical stuff. Less material waste, less pressure on landfills when these items aren't just being produced constantly and then discarded or stored away forever.
And all the space saved in people's homes, too.
Definitely. Another really powerful example the article uses is wheelchairs.
Right. Production emissions for those can be quite high. The article says between 250 and 500 kilograms of co-euro.
And wheelchairs are often needed just temporarily, aren't they? After an injury or surgery, or maybe for a relative visiting.
Exactly, which makes them incredibly suitable for a sharing model. The article mentions a potential rental life of 10 to 15 times over several years for just one wheelchair.
So sharing to just one can save thousands of kilograms of co-euros. And critically, it provides really essential temporary access for families who might struggle with the cost or just the logistics of buying one outright.
What the article really seemed to drive home is that these environmental savings aren't just about avoiding that initial hit from manufacturing.
No, there are significant ripple effects all the way through the economy and the supply chain.
Right. Fewer new items being made means, well, fewer delivery trucks clogging up the roads trying to deliver them.
Less packaging waste. All those cardboard boxes, the plastic wrap, the bubble wrap, ending up in recycling bins or worse, landfills.
And if you go upstream, back towards the start.
It means less demand for the raw materials themselves, less mining, less logging, less oil extraction needed in the first place.
And then downstream, at the end of life.
Fewer products ultimately ending up as waste in landfills after maybe a really brief period of primary use.
Beyond all the environmental and economic benefits, the article also touches on something else, maybe less obvious. A social bonus.
Yeah, it suggests that sharing and renting can actually help build stronger communities, as people connect locally, lending things, borrowing things from neighbors.
That makes sense. It fosters a bit more interaction.
And this whole movement, it isn't just some small niche idea anymore. The article indicates it's becoming a really major economic force.
They actually cite projections, putting the global sharing economy at, what was it? A staggering $1.5 trillion by 2030.
$1.5 trillion. And the rental market specifically is seeing rapid growth, reportedly somewhere between 10 and 20% annually.
Wow. Especially, it seems, in categories that just naturally lend themselves to temporary use. Like the baby gear we mentioned, outdoor equipment, even some electronics.
The article points to some statistics that are almost, unbelievable, but they really underscore the potential here.
Like the power drill one.
Exactly. Studies showing that the average power drill is used for just 13 minutes.
13 minutes in its entire lifetime.
Think about that. All the resources, the energy, the transport for 13 minutes of actual work.
That statistic alone just screams for a sharing model, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you fundamentally question the whole idea of ownership versus access for so many things we buy.
And the article talks about platforms like rentanythingstore.com, framing them as more than just, marketplaces.
Right. They're presented as part of this broader movement that's aiming to make sharing easy, safe.
They mention an owner's protection program, which is important for trust.
Crucial. Easy, secure, sustainable, and flexible for everyone involved. It empowers people.
How so?
Well, it lets individuals unlock the value hidden in their own unused stuff. You can earn some income from things just sitting there.
While also helping out your neighbors or community members.
And contributing to the health of the planet at the same time. It's a win-win-win.
The article presents this really powerful thought experiment, too. Imagine if just 1 million people worldwide each shared just one item they own. Maybe something sitting in the garage on a platform like this.
Just one item each, shared by 1 million people.
And let's imagine that each of those shared items meant that just one new item of that same type didn't need to be manufactured.
Okay, so 1 million avoided purchases based on the average €QO savings across various items we've discussed.
The article estimates that avoiding the production of just those 1 million new items could result in a total impact of 150 million kilograms of QO saved.
150 million kilos, which they dramatically but accurately equate to planting over 2.5 million trees.
And remember, that's just from one prevented purchase per shared item.
The potential just multiplies massively when those items get rented out multiple times over their lifespan, which the data suggests they usually do.
It really highlights how a seemingly small action, choosing to share or rent just one thing,
that individual choice can have this incredible ripple effect that scales up to major environmental impact when lots of people start doing it.
The article even brings this down to earth with some real examples. They mention Elisa, a mom renting out her extra baby gear.
Right, earning a bit of income, helping other families avoid buying new stuff they'll only use for a short time.
Or a guy named Jake, who runs a landscaping business.
Yeah, he rents out his bobcat loader when he's not using it himself.
Which gives neighbors, or maybe other small businesses, access to really expensive equipment they probably couldn't afford to buy, or wouldn't make sense to buy.
And then there was the example of Clara and Emily sharing photography gear.
Yeah, showing how this model can open up access to professional-level equipment for people who might not otherwise be able to afford it, fostering creativity, opportunity.
So if we look back at that environmental math the article summarizes, the case becomes incredibly clear, doesn't it?
It really does. A single SUP, shared 30-plus times, potentially saving nearly 3,000 kilograms of COO.
A bike shared 50-plus times, saving over 11,500 kilograms.
A stroller used by 15 families, saving over 2,100 kilograms.
And a wheelchair rented just 10 times, saving over 4,000 kilograms of COO.
When you start multiplying those kinds of savings by thousands or potentially millions of items being shared instead of bought new,
you rapidly get to these massive numbers, millions upon millions of kilograms of emissions avoided, all through these relatively simple transactional acts of sharing.
So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway here? The article seems to make a pretty clear call to action.
Yeah, it basically encourages you, the listener, to consider joining the shift. Maybe that means looking around your own home. Is there something you own but rarely use?
A tool, camping gear, those baby items again.
Could you list it on a platform? Earn a little extra money? Let someone else benefit from it.
Or perhaps looking at it from the other side.
The next time you need something just temporarily, that SUP for a weekend, a specific tool for a quick home repair, maybe a wheelchair for a few weeks while someone recovers.
Pause before you automatically click buy.
Exactly. Choose to rent it instead of buying it new.
It's about consciously participating in this shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where every rental isn't just a transaction.
It's framed as a positive sum game. It's a win for your wallet, potentially a win for your local community connections, and definitely a win for the planet's health.
So, bringing this deep dive to a close, the core message from the article feels powerful because it's so simple. Genuinely impactful environmental action doesn't always need huge top-down changes.
Right. It doesn't always require complex tech breakthroughs. Often it can start with these small individual choices we make every day.
Like opting for that shared stroller, or the rented bicycle, or borrowing that paddleboard.
Choosing to engage with a sharing model, consciously deciding not to default to just consuming more. It's like a quiet but really powerful vote.
A vote for what exactly?
Well, a vote for a future that values sustainability more than wastefulness, that prioritizes access to things when you need them, rather than just accumulating ownership.
And maybe builds more community connections instead of encouraging isolation through just buying everything individually.
It's really a fundamental shift in how we think about and interact with all the physical objects in our lives.
And the article leaves us, and leaves you, with a very specific, maybe even challenging, thought to really sit with.
Yeah, a practical action point.
The next time you find yourself thinking about buying something, just pause for a second.
And ask yourself that simple question. Can I rent it instead?
Asking that question and then actually exploring the answer.
It could end up being one of the easiest and yet most effective ways you can do yourself, and crucially, the earth a really significant favor.